It was a month later that 3 men arrived on the construction site. They were Mo Sedway, Gus Greenbaum, and Bugsy Siegel. And Bugsy Siegel stuck out his hand and said to my father, "I'm your new partner."
Like most people that aren't in the mob, you don't become a partner for long. So Billy was squeezed out eventually, and Bugsy took over the whole operation.
Suddenly, Bugsy Siegel, who knew nothing about building or running a hotel casino, was basking in his new role as head honcho of the Flamingo. From now on, he would claim that the resort was his idea all along.
Getting hold of the Flamingo seems to have gone fatally to Ben Siegel's head. And his grandiosity seems to have been stoked by Virginia Hill. The two of them got wrapped up, as people tend to when they're gutting and renewing a property.
Bugsy launched into the project with a frenzy. He had promised his investors it would open the day after Christmas, 1946, less than a year away, a nearly impossible task. He insisted on the most expensive furniture and fixtures, and even the most basic construction materials cost a fortune.
He was in a tough situation because it's immediately following World War II when there were shortages of many building materials. He didn't want to be held back, so he'd pay whatever it cost.
Not only was the material expensive to begin with, but when Bugsy was duped into paying for the same items 2, sometimes 3 times, the cost spiraled.
He wanted palm trees. Well, they'd send palm trees up on the truck, and then palm trees at night would go back down to Baker or Barstow. And the next day, palm trees would come back up, and he bought the same palm trees, I think, at least 10 times. And they're expensive, and that's where the money was going. The money was going into things he was buying over and over again because he had no idea. And yet he was a stubborn, you know, he was a mob boss. He wanted to control it, and he made every mistake, you know, you can believe.
Bugsy was also forced to pay extra for fixing construction mistakes. One overrun stemmed from a problem with the support beam in the ceiling of his private suite.
The beam was 5 foot 8 inches from the floor, and he was about 5'10". And he called me, and I was in my office. He said, "Get out here." He said, he was so mad he was burning the wires. And I got out, and I walked one side of the room to the other. Didn't bother me. I was 5'6", so it didn't bother me. And he showed me that he couldn't get one side of the living room upstairs to the other without stooping. He was livid.
Bugsy also discovered a design problem in the hotel kitchen.
One day Ben went in and was behind the counter or something, and he bent over and his butt hit one of the hot stoves. They made some changes in that pretty quick, you know, because his butt got burned.
Bugsy was burning a hole in his pocket on a much larger scale, and his investors were getting singed as well. Within a matter of months, the projected cost of completing the Flamingo had jumped from $1 million to $4 million. Bugsy approached his old friend Meyer Lansky, hoping to convince the mob to put up more money. The mob turned him down.
They were not accustomed to that in the world where they operated, and their tolerance level was diminishing very, very rapidly.
Siegel's reaction to this was to panic and become more violent and more threatening and more full of rages. Virginia was the one person he could turn to, and she was a very bad person to turn to because she had her own faults, her own grandiosity, her own short temper, her own demands that she made on him.
Bugsy began to grow paranoid. He built secret passageways, one starting from a trapdoor hidden in the floor of the closet in his suite and leading to a hallway in the bowels of the building, a project which added to the Flamingo's skyrocketing price tag. Bugsy's business problems were magnified by woman problems. By the summer of 1946, his wife Esther had had enough neglect from Bugsy and humiliation from his very public affair with Virginia. Esther went to Reno, Nevada, and got a divorce. She was awarded $600 a month in alimony and custody of both children. The end of Ben's 17-year marriage failed to bring peace to his relationship with Virginia.
When they would have a fight, she would throw everything she could get her hands on. Wherever they stayed in his room, he had a suite there. Everything was broken. Lamps, ashtrays, it didn't make anything different. And the help would stand out in the corridor, me too sometimes, and listen to him. And then after they'd have this big fight, then they'd make love like you wouldn't believe.
One afternoon, Flamingo architect Richard Stadelman discovered yet another use for Bugsy's bedroom.
He said, I was called up to Bugsy's suite in the middle of the day. And there was Bugsy and Virginia Hill in bed, naked. And they received me and told me exactly what they wanted. Fortunately, he said, it was about construction and design. So it took him a little while to get over this and a few drinks.
Bugsy was racing to finish the Flamingo for the grand opening. But as the deadline drew near, only the casino, the restaurant, and the showroom were finished, and just barely. The hotel rooms were not. Fellow mobsters warned Bugsy to delay the grand opening celebration until the hotel was completed. But Bugsy didn't listen. December 26th, 1946. Torrential rains beat down on Las Vegas. Opening night at the Flamingo was a bit of a washout. Band leader Xavier Cugat and comedian Jimmy Durante performed as planned. But most of the celebrities Bugsy invited couldn't make it because planes weren't leaving L.A. in the storm.
The opening was jammed, but more with curious locals than with the celebrities that Siegel had been counting on.
Bugsy's opening was also plagued by nagging construction mishaps.
They had a big problem because the kitchen doors were swinging in the wrong way, and waiters were falling all over the place with big trays because somebody was coming in when they were going out and went the wrong way. And Virginia screaming at him, "You dummy."
But the costliest problem was the lack of hotel accommodations for the hordes of local gamblers trying out the new casino.
You couldn't have gotten in that hotel with a shoehorn, but they lost the players because they went to the El Rancho and the Frontier after they either won or big or lost big. They weren't able to hold them. They didn't have the room.
Over the next few weeks, the Flamingo limped along, losing money. On February 1st, Ben closed the hotel for a month to finish construction. He reopened in March 1947. Now, Bugsy was like a mother hen, attending to the details of running the Flamingo. His friends and colleagues got a rare glimpse into the management style of the charming killer turned hotelier.
We were in the bar in the cocktail lounge one night, and there was a young lady and a man, and the cigarette girl gave her a pack of cigarettes, and she paid for them. And he called the cigarette girl over and he said, if you ever have a lady seated with a gentleman and she orders cigarettes and he doesn't pay for them, don't you accept any money. You come to me and I'll pay you for them. He was a real gentleman in public. I always found him that way.
But Virginia did not always enjoy watching Bugsy play the part of the charming casino boss.
And a beautiful blonde girl came through the front door of the Flamingo and walked over to Ben, and she was asking for a job. So Virginia says, look what's going on up there. We'll see how long he's going to take him to say no, she's not getting the job. So he was talking too long to the girl, as far as Virginia Hill didn't please her anyway. So she picked up her drink, and just like she was throwing a football, and she threw that drink all the way down the bar, and it went right between their faces, the girls and Ben's. I don't know how it missed him, unless he saw it coming. But, boy, that girl went out the front door so fast.
Ever so slowly, the Flamingo was beginning to creep out of the red, but not fast enough for the Mafia. Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky were demanding a final accounting of the money they had sunk into the project. Bugsy was stalling. For the first time in his life, Bugsy was in over his head with the mob. Bugsy Siegel was in trouble. The Flamingo Hotel project soared millions over budget, and by the spring of 1947, there were rumors that Virginia Hill, or Bugsy, or both, were stealing from the mob. Mafia leader Lucky Luciano was losing patience with Bugsy and his pet project. It was becoming increasingly clear that Bugsy was bad for business.
The investors felt he had to be replaced, and they knew his personality. They knew that you don't walk in and say, Ben, we've decided on a change in management. You can remain as an investor, but you're out of the picture. So I think the decision was made that the only way to tell him he was finished was to finish him.
Even Meyer Lansky, one of the big investors, could do little to help his boyhood friend, Bugsy.
I think he ignored some of the warning signs he must have gotten from Lansky. Lansky reluctantly and probably sadly just stepped back and let others handle that matter.
The tense situation was taking its toll on Bugsy's relationship with Virginia. On June 19th, they had a huge blowout that couldn't be fixed with a little lovemaking. She boarded a plane bound for Paris. It was said that the mob had warned her to keep away from Bugsy.
I think Virginia Hill was a very streetwise lady who knew how so-called gangland operated and took flight.
After Virginia left, Bugsy returned to Los Angeles to attend to some business. June 20th, 1947 began as a good day for Bugsy Siegel. He got a shave and a haircut at Drucker's in Beverly Hills. He palled around a bit with his old friend actor George Raft and had a few Flamingo-related business meetings. He ran into a gambling buddy named Alan Smiley and invited him to dinner. They dined at Ben's favorite steak joint with Virginia Hill's brother Chick and his girlfriend Jerry. Afterwards, the group returned to Virginia's mansion at 810 North Linden Drive. Chick and Jerry, who were staying at the house, went to bed. Smiley and Bugsy relaxed in the living room. Bugsy was reading the LA Times. It was 10:30 p.m., and the house was quiet.
He was seated at a couch when a man crept up through the shrubbery against the window.
Somebody put a carbine on the trestle outside the living room.
9 shots ripped through the silence.
One bullet penetrated his eye socket, and the eyeball was actually found on the other side of the room.
The second bullet shattered the back of his neck, broke his nose, and smashed his other eye. The last 7 bullets lodged into the walls and furniture. Bugsy Siegel was dead.
It was a very merciful death. It looked gruesome, but it was instantaneous. He never knew what hit him.
News traveled fast that night, across the desert to the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas.
I got to the hotel, I found out he'd been killed. And that was a shock to me. I say everybody in the hotel was crying. But the first guy I saw when I got there was Moe Sedway.
Moe walked up to the microphone within 5 minutes after it happened. Flamingo, Benjamin Siegel, is dead.
It was a classic mob takeover. That night, Virginia Hill was somewhere in Europe.
I often wonder where she was when she first heard the news. Was she in a nightclub? Was she in her bedroom in a hotel? Or did she hear it over the radio? Or how did she hear it, you know?
Even in death, Benjamin Siegel had style. He was buried in a $5,000 silver-plated casket. Only 5 mourners were at his funeral. His ex-wife Esther, his 2 teenage daughters Barbara and Millicent, his brother Maurice, a respected Hollywood physician, and Bessie Soloway, his favorite sister. The ceremony took 5 minutes and was over before the funeral home officially opened for the day. In the years following Ben's murder, Virginia Hill tried to lead a quieter life. She married an Austrian ski instructor, settled in Washington State, and had a son. But her past would not leave her alone. In 1951, she was called to testify before Congress about the mob and Bugsy.
And when I was with Ben, he paid for everything.
By Ben, you mean Ben Siegel?
Yes. And he gave me some money, too, and bought me a house in Florida.
The government nearly caught up with her in 1954 on charges of tax evasion, but she fled to Europe. On March 24th, 1966, Virginia Hill was found dead on a mountaintop in Austria. Her death was ruled a suicide,